What's up, everybody? It's Young Cure, and welcome to a Metal Gear Solid 5 discussion video. So today I want to talk about the character I was most disappointed with in MGS5. This is someone I was really looking forward to seeing in action, who in the end didn't really pan out the way I would have liked him to. That character is Revolver Ocelot. Let's talk about who Ocelot is for a second, because I feel like Phantom Pain completely missed the mark. Looking back at his entire arc, from his youthful days in Metal Gear Solid 3 to his older self in Metal Gear Solid 1 and 2, and his final days in Metal Gear Solid 4, I think it's pretty clear that this guy is a nutcase. Let's face it, the guy's a weirdo, and he isn't ashamed of it one bit.
This is the greatest handgun ever made. The Colt Single-Action Army. Gift of the Silver Tongue. They say it's the mark of a good officer. Bang! Think again.
He's also a cocky son of a bitch.
He's the Ocelot commander.
Ha! That's Major Ocelot to you. And don't you forget it. What is that stance? Huh. That gun.
6 bullets. More than enough to kill anything that moves. Now I'll show you why they call me Revolver. I am Shalashaska, also called Revolver Ocelot. Sergey, looks like you were long overdue for retirement. I never thought it would be so easy. You almost did it. But it looks like I win after all.
He's just a flamboyant mofo with one too many loose screws in his head. And guess what? We wouldn't have it any other way. His quirkiness is what makes Ocelot so, well, Ocelot. These are all aspects of the character that have been consistent from MGS1 to MGS4. Couple all that with his incredible skills, level of finesse, utter badassery, and the fact that he always seems to be 3 steps ahead of everyone else, and one can't help but love this character and look forward to his next appearance on screen. He's just a fun character to watch. Enter middle-aged Ocelot in Metal Gear Solid 5, and I've just gotta wonder what the hell happened. Ocelot is absolutely no fun to watch in Phantom Pain. He's like a completely different character in this game. Where's the flamboyant Ocelot we all know and love? He's just so serious and unemotive most of the time throughout Phantom Pain that I often wonder if he just started going through puberty. The only time we get a glimpse of the old Ocelot is towards the beginning of the game during the Afghanistan intro cutscene, where we see him theatrically say some deliciously cheesy lines while using his trademark hand gestures.
Now go! Let the legend come back to life.
But from there on out, within the confines of Mother Base, he just feels like your average dude. Now, some might say that the reason Ocelot's personality has been dialed down so much was because he's grown up and that he's matured or whatever. But flash forward to Shadow Moses, Big Shell, and Liquid Ocelot's insurrection, and he is back to his old self. It just doesn't make sense, especially when MGS3's younger Ocelot made so much sense in the context of the older Ocelot we saw in the previous 2 games. Snake Eater's young Ocelot was clearly the same cool, badass, flamboyant, quirky Ocelot that we all know and love, but without the experience. He was also overconfident, arrogant, egotistical, proud, and a complete show-off, a lot of which he would retain throughout the years, but with a major difference being that the older Ocelot skills actually match up to his confidence. So basically, MGS3's Ocelot was essentially a young, newbie version of Ocelot, and that was immediately clear from beginning to end in Snake Eater. MGS5's Ocelot, on the other hand, it's like, who are you? Almost nothing about the way the character was written or performed feels like Ocelot. And don't get me wrong, I think Troy Baker did an excellent job performing the character that he was given, but I don't feel that he was given the role of Ocelot, but rather some dude with an Ocelot coat of paint. I would be willing to forgive Ocelot's diminished personality and role if we at least got to see him in action in the field, juggling his revolvers around and kicking all kinds of ass like he did in every other game, but we see none of that here. Where the hell is the MGO3 Ocelot? Instead, his only purpose in the game seems to be to play secretary and advisor, none of which suits Ocelot in the first place, and when we do see him in action, it's only during a handful of torture scenes. But even then, we don't see Shalashaska. We don't see the sadistic son of a bitch that Volgan created in MGS3 when he allowed Ocelot to witness the brutal torture of Naked Snake, or the sadistic bastard who gets off on torturing Solid Snake in MGS1. I mean, come on, this is Ocelot we're talking about. The guy is messed up in the head. His sadism is a part of who he is, and hell, that's what earned him the title of Shalashaska in the first place, and yet we barely see that side of him in Phantom Pain. Sure, he participates in the torture sessions, but he seems pretty tame about it compared to past games. His methods just don't seem all that brutal. Truth serum? Really? That's all you got? If anything, it's Kaz who goes all out. Like when he uses Huey's mechanical legs against him, when he uses electricity to torture Quiet, or when he pours salt water on her to slowly and painfully burn and suffocate her. And hell, it's Ocelot who stops Quiet's torture session. Now, one important distinction to make is that Kaz's reasons for brutality are byproducts of anger and lust for revenge, rather than sadism, but I was still hoping to see the sadistic side of Ocelot considering Kojima's promise that this game would contain taboo elements. It's just really weird to see Ocelot be the voice of reason and order rather than the wild card he normally is, and I just hate that this character and role have been reduced to that of walking encyclopedia and secretary, whereas before, he always had an active role in the overall story and where it was headed next. Not so in Phantom Pain. Sure, he's instrumental in pulling off Zero's plan to help Big Boss go into hiding by creating a Phantom Big Boss, but that's about as much of a role he plays. On a gameplay front, yeah, Ocelot plays a vital role as he, alongside Kaz, teaches the player how to play the game, provides mission briefings, and yada yada yada. But I'm just not terribly happy about the fact that it was Ocelot who was given this role. It makes sense with Kaz, as he's been playing the role of instructor since MGS1, even if it was under the guise of Liquid Snake, so it's only fitting for him to play a similar role in Peace Walker and Phantom Pain. But when it comes to Ocelot, it just doesn't make sense, at least not without giving him a more active role down the line as the story progresses. Now, one thing that Phantom Pain's Ocelot does retain is his deceitful nature. Like in past Metal Gears, we find out at the end of the game that Ocelot was in on many aspects of the plot the entire time, in this case being the fact that Venom Snake is the Phantom Big Boss that Zero created to keep the real Big Boss safe. But even this doesn't quite exude Ocelot like his other schemes did. Normally, Ocelot's schemes involve double-crossing a certain party in favor of another, which actually is for himself. In Phantom Pain, however, it feels less like that, and more like he kept a really big secret for a really long time, which isn't quite the same thing and isn't quite as enthralling as the double crosses. And unlike in past games, rather than it feeling like Ocelot is moving his own agenda forward, this time it feels like he's going along for the ride, in this case, Zero's ride. As a result, even Ocelot's deceitful nature feels far less substantial in Phantom Pain. Admittedly, there was probably not a lot of room to show off this aspect of him due to his role as Mother Base advisor, secretary, and instructor or whatever, but this is exactly why I believe this kind of role doesn't belong to him. It diminishes who he is as a character. It's a shame, really. Ocelot is supposed to be the wild card of every game. It's what makes his character so compelling in the first place. He's also supposed to be flamboyant and quirky, yet sadistic and fearsome all at the same time. He's supposed to give you the feeling that he's always 3 steps ahead of everyone else. Most importantly, he's supposed to be a character that you can't help but look forward to see. Unfortunately, we get very little of that in Phantom Pain. While there's nothing wrong with shifting or changing characters' roles and status quo, as that often can yield interesting circumstances, and while I get that Kojima was going for a darker and more grounded game and story, and in turn more grounded performances, it's still important to maintain the essence of a character. They handled it right with characters like Kaz and Huey. There are legitimately good reasons for why Kaz and Huey are the way they are in Phantom Pain. The trauma from the events of Ground Zeroes left them both damaged in their own way, both physically and mentally, but at their core, they are still those characters. Kaz is still the same Kaz from Peace Walker, and we get glimpses of the old him through things like the Hamburger's audio tapes, but he's now angry and in a lot of pain, both physically and emotionally. There's also Huey, who has been put under the most extreme conditions to the point where he had no choice but to be self-serving, but we still see the same man whose greatest passion is creating technology, a passion that's abused by entities like Skullface and even Diamond Dogs. In Phantom Pain, both Huey and Kaz are clearly in a very different place than they were 9 years ago, but I feel like their essence were kept intact. The same couldn't be said for Ocelot, however, and what makes it worse is that unlike characters like Kaz and Huey, we get to see extensively the man that Ocelot will become in previous games, making this subdued Ocelot all the more jarring. The essence of who he was during MGS 3, or who he will become in MGS 1, 2, and 4, are almost non-existent in this game in my eyes. And when you strip away a character's essence, what you get is a character whose recognition only comes in name and face. Sometimes I question who's supposed to be the Phantom in this game, Venom Snake or Ocelot. Like Venom Snake, at his core, something in Ocelot's makeup just don't see eye to eye. So there you have it, folks. With that, I would like to end this segment of Metal Gear Solid 5 The Phantom Pain. Thank you for tuning in. Let us know in the comments below your thoughts about Ocelot. Do you agree with my stance or do you disagree? And also, let us know if you have a least favorite character you'd like to share with us. And to be further updated on Metal Gear Solid 5, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.